The morning sun lit the edges of the mirror as I clipped the final strand of hair into place. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, composed, polished, but frayed beneath the surface. 37 wasn't old, I reminded myself. But some days, it felt like a century had passed through my bones. My name is Mira. I teach literature at a small liberal arts college in Vermont. I live in a cedar-shingled house that smells faintly of bergamot and wood smoke. My husband, Nathan, and I share a life that looks perfect on paper. We used to have that kind of passion that stole breath from the room. Now we barely steal glances. Lately, Nathan spoke in clipped tones, always into his phone, always ending conversations with tension. The warmth in our marriage had drained slowly, like heat from a teacup left out in the cold. From down the hall, I heard the low thrum of music. Ben was awake. Benjamin, but he preferred Ben, was Nathan's godson. 21, restless, and full of questions. His mother, Nathan's childhood friend, had asked us to take him in after a rough semester in Denver. Just until he gets back on track, she said. At first, I agreed easily. But Ben had a way of waking something in me I didn't know I'd buried. A spark of irreverence, of wonder, of hunger for something more than syllabi and strained silences. He wanted to transfer schools, maybe major in creative writing. Sometimes I helped him edit. "You don't talk down to me," he said once, after I handed back a marked-up draft. "That's because you're not stupid," I said. "You just need to slow your thoughts down enough for the page to catch up." One afternoon in the kitchen, he reached for glass at the same time I did. Our fingers brushed. Just a touch. His eyes held mine unblinking. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us pulled away. Later that night, Nathan didn't come home until after midnight. "Client meeting," he said. I didn't press. I hadn't pressed in a long time. I sat by the fireplace with a book I didn't read, wine glass in hand, and silence thick around me. Ben passed by, paused at the archway. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine." He nodded, but his gaze lingered. Not pity, not concern, recognition. Friday came, and Nathan left for a weekend seminar in the city. I had planned to spend the time rediscovering myself, dancing barefoot upstairs, reading for pleasure, maybe even writing again. But instead, the rain came. Steady, rhythmic, like the world had forgotten how to be loud. Ben wandered into the kitchen around noon. "You making tea?" he asked. "Just about." "Jasmine or peppermint?" Surprise me. He took the cup from me and, as always, sipped too soon. I smiled when he pretended it didn't burn. "You act like you're immune to boiling water." He grinned. "Only when it's from you." We ended up watching old films in the den. He claimed he had never seen To Catch a Thief, which I declared cinematic negligence. Popcorn was made. He sprawled on the couch, his socked feet near mine. Halfway through, I laughed, a real laugh, not the polite, careful one I usually wore around Nathan. Ben looked at me, not the screen. "You should laugh more," he said. "It suits you." Something shifted then. Quiet. Dangerous. I excused myself, citing grading, but when I stood, he reached out and touched my wrist. Just a touch. But everything in me froze. "Mira," he said. There was no question, no plea. Just my name, like a thread being pulled loose. I stepped back, heart racing. He didn't follow. But I felt him watching me leave. And that feeling stayed with me all night. Saturday morning came thick with unsaid things. I kept myself busy, cleaning what was already clean, organizing the spice rack alphabetically. Ben's door was closed, silent. I told myself I was glad. Nathan called from Chicago. We exchanged the usual appointments, errands, updates. When he asked if everything was fine, I answered honestly. "It's quiet." "Been giving you any trouble?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not at all." Later, Ben returned from wherever he had gone, the art studio, I guessed, based on the charcoal smudges on his arm. We stood at the kitchen island, eating strawberries and yogurt like it was a brunch we'd both forgotten to invite guests to. "About yesterday," I started. "You don't have to explain," he interrupted. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable around me. I'm not, I admitted. I'm just confused. So am I. He said it without shame, without a trace of apology. It wasn't a confession. It was a truth. There's this idea, he said, that the older you get, the more sure of yourself you're supposed to be. But I think people just get better at pretending. I looked at him, really looked, and something inside me trembled. You shouldn't say things like that, I said quietly. They make it hard to breathe. He rinsed his bowl and left the kitchen. But I stood there long after he had gone, breath still uneven. Because he was right. Pretending only works for so long. The days that followed blurred into a steady rhythm of restraint. Nathan returned from Chicago, more preoccupied than ever, already speaking about another upcoming conference. He didn't notice how I no longer lingered in the den with Ben, how I kept my eyes down over dinner, how the hush in the house felt full instead of empty. But Ben noticed. One evening, I paused outside the guest room. His door was ajar, pencil scratching softly across paper. I lingered, just long enough for him to sense me there. Can't sleep, he asked. I could have lied. I should have. Instead, I stepped inside. He was at his desk, sketchpad open, the lamplight casting shadows across his forearms. I crossed the room, hesitant, curious. What are you drawing? I asked. He turned the pad toward me. A woman, seated, legs pulled in, her expression somewhere between thought and yearning. She's supposed to be hopeful, he said, but unsure. She looks familiar, I murmured. He looked at me then, not startled, not coy, but with a quiet recognition that made it difficult to breathe. Can I sit? He nodded. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly too aware of every inch between us. Why her? I asked. He shrugged lightly. Because the things we don't say have to go somewhere. I looked at the sketch again, tracing its lines with my eyes, not my hands. Ben, we can't pretend this isn't complicated. I'm not pretending, he said. I just don't want to lie about how it feels. His honesty stripped me bare. I'm not asking for anything, he added. I just want to be near you. You are, I said softly. Too near. Still, I didn't move. That night, there were no declarations, no kisses, no reckless choices. Just presence. Stillness. The kind of closeness that doesn't require touch to be intimate. And somehow, that made it all the more dangerous. The next morning, I found Ben in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of eggs and coffee filled the space like memory. You didn't have to cook, I said, wrapping my robe tighter. He looked over his shoulder. Didn't want you to start your day hungry. I gave a soft laugh. I already am. Then caught myself. For food, I mean. He smiled, unfazed. You don't have to be careful around me, I said, voice low. I'm not being careful, he said. I'm being intentional. The way he said it made me go still. He didn't look away. He didn't need to. We spent that weekend orbiting each other quietly. Long walks by the lake, coffee shared at the dining table, conversations that dipped into longing without quite crossing into confession. It wasn't a whirlwind. It was a slow unraveling. Nathan left again the following week, this time to DC. I didn't ask what for. I rarely did anymore. That night, Ben and I found ourselves in the living room, a record spinning soft jazz in the background. I sat by the fire, wine in hand, watching shadows dance across the walls. Ben entered the room with a quiet energy. No expectations. Just presence. He held his sketch pad but didn't open it. Do you ever miss dancing? He asked. I blinked. Why? I found the studio upstairs yesterday. Saw the shoes. The music stand. I hesitated. I used to dance every weekend, back when it didn't feel like a strange indulgence. It's not strange, he said. It's who you are. I studied him. The way he leaned slightly forward, not pressing, just inviting. Sometimes, I said, I miss myself. He nodded. Then find her again. That night, I didn't go to bed right away. I climbed the stairs to the studio, barefoot, wine still warm in my chest. I stood in front of the long mirror, placed my hand on the bar, and turned once, slowly, cautiously. And in the mirror, for a moment, I saw her again. Ben, and I didn't speak about that turning point. We didn't need to. He began leaving me notes, small slips of paper folded like secrets. Don't forget to laugh. The light in the studio at sunset looks like you. Thank you for seeing me. They weren't love letters, but they were. Nathan remained oblivious, too consumed by deadlines, projects, conference calls. One evening, I returned home late from a university panel. The house was dim, save for the soft glow of candles on the mantel. Ben sat on the floor near the fire, sketching absently. "You're home," he said. I nodded, too tired to pretend composure. "It went well." He looked up. "You seem more alive." I felt like myself, I admitted. He didn't press, just smiled and handed me a blanket. We didn't touch. But I felt it anyway, the weight of everything we weren't saying. The longing threaded through each glance. And still, we held the line. When Nathan left for Chicago that Thursday, it felt like the last piece had been cleared from the board. He kissed my cheek absently in the driveway. "You'll be okay without me?" "Always," I said. That night, the house was quiet, and the quiet felt like permission. I poured a glass of red wine and waited by the fire, unsure of what I was waiting for. Ben entered slowly, not as a guest but as something else, not claiming, not chasing. Just being. He didn't sit on the couch. Instead, he settled beside me on the floor, close but not touching. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just want to be near you." His fingers brushed mine, not enough to startle, but enough to root. And I let him stay. That night, we didn't fall into chaos or confessions. We shared breath, pulse, stillness. And when I woke before dawn, his arm was around me, his breath on my shoulder. I slipped away quietly, unsure what the morning would bring. But I knew something had changed, irrevocably. When Nathan returned that Sunday evening, I felt the shift inside me like a tectonic plate slipping. He unpacked without ceremony, asked about the water filter, mentioned his phone charger was missing. I answered each question like a script I had memorized years ago. We shared the same space, but not the same presence. His voice filled the rooms, but his attention never settled. Ben kept his distance. We no longer lingered in the same room. He passed me the salt without looking. I left the room before he entered. We were careful, too careful, but the silence was louder than anything we could have said. Later that week, I stood on the porch, book in hand, pretending to read. Nathan joined me, beer in one hand, sigh in the other. "The lawn needs mowing again," he muttered. "I can call someone." "No. Ben can do it." There was something dismissive in the way he said it, something that stung. As if Ben were still a boy Nathan could command, not the man I had come to know. "You two have gotten close," he said, too casually. I didn't look up. "We live in the same house." The silence that followed was longer than expected. "You ever think about kids?" he asked suddenly. "Sometimes," I said, "but not often." Nathan studied me then, his gaze different, more calculating than curious. "You're different." "I am. Is there something I should know?" I didn't answer, but we both knew he wasn't asking out of suspicion. He was asking because part of him already knew. He stood with a sigh. "Just remember who gave you this life." I turned to him fully, finally. "I do. That's how I know it's no longer mine." The next morning, I told Ben I was leaving. We stood in his room, sunlight pooling on the rug like spilled honey. "I'm not asking you to come with me," I said. "I just need to choose myself again." He stood still, unreadable. Then finally, "Where will you go?" "My sister's. She has space." He nodded. "I understand." I hesitated. "I don't want this to be the end." Ben stepped closer, voice low. "Do you want me to fight for you?" I blinked. "No," I said. "I want you to be sure." 2 weeks passed. I packed my life into 3 suitcases and a box of books. Nathan didn't protest. He didn't weep. He simply stood by the door with arms folded and said, "Don't expect me to chase you." I never did. Ben wasn't home when I left. I had timed it that way. The next day, a message arrived. "I'm sure. Come back." But I didn't.
Not yet.
I needed space.
Time. Proof.
He understood. Over the next few months, we wrote. Not texts, not emails. Letters.
Handwritten. Raw.
Unfiltered. He told me about his sketches, his long walks, his failed attempts at poetry. I told him about the studio I had begun dancing in again, the scent of pine where I stayed, the way my body remembered rhythm when no one was watching. Each letter was a thread sewn into something new, a tapestry we were still learning how to weave. I kept them in a shoebox beneath my bed. Ink-smudged corners. Folded edges. Truths I couldn't speak aloud. Then spring arrived. And with it something else. One morning, I stepped barefoot into the studio, sunlight pouring through the windows. I turned once, not for performance, not for pride. Just for me. Later that day, I opened my mailbox. A violet fell into my palm. Inside the envelope was a sketch. Me, mid-spin, hair caught in motion, lips parted in a smile I hadn't seen in years. Beneath it, a line in Ben's handwriting. "You found yourself again. Now let me find you too." I moved to a small house outside Montpelier. A porch. A studio. A room for nothing but books and quiet. I planted herbs. I painted a wall turquoise on impulse. And one Sunday Ben arrived. Not with flowers. Not with promises. With paint swatches and a toolkit. "I'm not here to fix you," he said. "I'm here to build something with you." And just like that, I reached for his hand. We painted the studio white. We drank tea in silence. We didn't rush. We didn't explain. It wasn't about being bold. It was about being ready. That fall, he opened a gallery in town. His portraits hung on brick walls like whispered confessions. In the far corner, beneath soft light, hung a sketch of me. Caught between movement and stillness, it's been over a year now. People still whisper. Quiet speculation trailing behind us like the hem of a rumor. About the age difference. About the timing. About what they assume they understand. But we don't respond. We walk through the world not with defiance, but with calm. Because we've lived enough truth to stop explaining ourselves to those who measure love in symmetry instead of substance. The house we share is modest. 2 bedrooms. A wide porch that catches the sun just before it disappears over the hills. The wind chime hums a melody I didn't realize I'd been missing. We don't fill our days with declarations. We fill them with doing, painting trim, picking wildflowers, drinking tea on quiet mornings. Ben's studio is filled with life now. Sketches pinned to every surface. Ink under his nails. Music humming low through the speakers. Sometimes he draws me. Sometimes he doesn't have to. I'm already there, in the rhythm of his work, in the shape of our silence. One evening, I came home from a community reading. My voice was still hoarse from reciting Mary Oliver. He was sitting on the porch steps, barefoot, a steaming mug of cider in his hands. Without a word, he stood, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered, "You sounded like you remembered who you were." And I had. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing a life. I was living one. Some nights, we sit beneath the stars and say nothing. No need to fill the dark. We've both lived enough years trying to make noise in the silence. Now we let it hold us. He still leaves me notes. Not every day, not always sweet. Some are just fragments. The world gets quieter when you walk into a room. The basil bloomed today. I thought of your laugh. Do you ever dream of starting over and waking up already there? One afternoon, I found a poem tucked inside my journal. Just 6 lines. No title. But I knew it was for me. It ended. And when the sky leaned down to speak her name, she did not hide. She answered. We visit the campus sometimes. Quietly. I've stepped away from full-time teaching, choosing instead to guest lecture, to guide a few students one-on-one. I focus now on the parts of literature that teach people how to see, how to feel. Ben sometimes joins, listening from the back, sketching while I speak. They never ask who he is. And I never explain. Occasionally, Nathan's name comes up. In paperwork. In passing. We don't talk much. There's no animosity. Just distance. A quiet agreement that the version of me he once loved no longer lives in the house we built together. And maybe she never did. He sent a single email last winter. I hope you found what you were looking for. I never responded. But I did. Ben's mother writes sometimes. Her letters are cautious, measured. She asks if he's well, if he's still drawing, if he's settled. She doesn't ask about me. Not directly. But I can feel her presence in the white space between each line. He replies kindly, carefully. But he doesn't apologize for the life he's chosen. Neither do I. There was a day in spring when I stood on the porch and watched him work in the garden, sleeves rolled, hair tousled from the wind. He looked up, squinting into the sun, and smiled like he had found the center of the world. And I knew then, deep in my bones, that whatever this was, whatever name others would or wouldn't give it, it was mine. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. People often ask what love looks like when it's not new. I tell them, it looks like return. Like the moment you choose something or someone not out of desperation or fear or timing, but out of truth, out of knowing, out of the long, slow ache of having forgotten yourself, and then remembering in someone else's gaze. It looks like a quiet kitchen, 2 mugs on the counter, the hum of a kettle, a half-read book on the couch, the smell of sage and ink, and the faint trace of bergamot. It looks like Ben tracing a line down my spine after a long day, like me placing a hand over his while he sketches, like 2 people meeting again and again in the same space, never asking the other to be anything but honest. We're not perfect. We still argue about the dishes, about whose turn it is to buy coffee beans, about whether jazz or folk should play on Sundays. But we never argue about who we are to each other. That part is quiet.
Sure.
Unshaken. The future comes gently now, not as something to chase, but as something we build one day at a time. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had silenced that first instinct, the moment I noticed his eyes holding mine too long, or when his fingers brushed mine across a teacup. If I had walked away before the unraveling began. But then I wouldn't have become this version of myself, the one who laughs, who dances again, who chooses herself not once, but every single day. Love, I've learned, doesn't always come as a thunderclap. Sometimes it arrives like the tide.
Soft. Steady.
Pulling you back to the shore you forgot was yours, where someone is waiting, not to rescue, not to complete, but to recognize, to remind,
To say,
I see you, and mean it.